Good evening. I'm Jonathan Stevens. I'm on the board of the Fredericksburg Food Co-op, and I'd like to welcome you here today to the Spring Garden. We're going to talk about getting ready for the Spring Garden and do our best to answer all your gardening questions. I'll have a brief, I hope, presentation for maybe 10 minutes, I hope, or less, and just have a few points to make, and I'll ask you to hold any questions or ask Rich to collect and hold any questions until the end of my prepared remarks. And then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. And if your questions don't get answered tonight, we'll take care of them. I'm glad to be here in the new year, and it's going to be a great year.
Natalia.
So now this is the slide I've used before. It's from the forest right behind my home on Lee Drive in Fredericksburg Battlefield Park. And my point is a little different this time from before. When the first leaf fell from the first tree, it captured the components of methane and sequestered them in the ground. And every time we let something
We're doing a gardening thing at the Fredericksburg
kind of
Co-op
place, we're
thing that is,
if we let it fall to the ground and cover it, in other words, compost it, why we'll be able to keep that from forming methane in our atmosphere, which is, as you know, the second most horrible greenhouse gas after carbon dioxide. This was brought home to me very recently by, of all organizations, Dominion Power, in their annual report to the customers, when they bragged about all the composting that their employees had done, that they had facilitated and rewarded. Something like 1,000 pounds a month or something of Good? Okay. Slight technical difficulties. So my last point about this is I do have spare buckets. If anybody needs something to put under their sink to gather compost and deliver to me or some other place of our choosing, you're welcome to any of these containers. And I would suggest that the designer compost bin on your countertop is the new fashion accessory to the progressive-minded people. So that's my 2 cents. So we have not only the concern about methane, but also the brand new initiative that has just started to take off in the last few weeks, as far as I'm concerned, from our local food bank. Now, everybody knows that our local food bank is this great behemoth here in Fredericksburg that has a huge warehouse way back behind all these factories in a horrible, inaccessible location. Well, that's about to change. The food bank has new management, and they're determined to make something happen. I've been in touch with Latifa Lee, who may be on our call today. She is. Latifa, I'm introducing you and without you here because you weren't feeling too well. But I thank you so much for everything you're doing, Latifa. And this is Latifa's, let's go ahead to that, please. There. This is Latifa's poster or flyer called Grow a Row for Your Local Food Bank. And to summarize this, anybody who would like to grow food for the food bank, I'll help you. And the amazing thing is that the food bank is inviting individuals, backyard gardeners, to grow some produce dedicated to the food bank and deliver it. And they guarantee that it'll come through their process and probably be in the fridge of a needy family probably within 24 hours, certainly within its sell-by date, and put to good use. So please consider this wonderful initiative that Latifa started with advice from Dan Mayer and the senior management at the food bank. So I'm just thrilled by that. And I have her information here. And if anybody would like to contact Latifa, I'm sure that she'd be delighted to talk to you. And I have her card, I have a number of her cards here, and we can certainly get them to the audience out there on Zoom. So let's go to the next slide. Please, Tony, thank you. So this is my challenge. I don't know if everybody can read this screen from afar, so I'll read it. This is Jonathan's challenge to local friends of the food co-op. If you agree to dedicate a row of your present or future garden this year to the food bank, I will give you, I promise you, while supplies last, hurry, a free gallon of my best compost, and I have a sample right here. It's showing? Yes, I have a sample here. I call it my black gold. And when you open it up and feel it and smell it, you'll agree with that. A free soil test. Don't start a garden without a soil test, so you know what to add and not to add in terms of nutrients. Makes a big difference to the product. That's a $10 value at Virginia Tech. So I'm making sure it happens, and I'll help you sample it. It's not hard. The instructions are in it. Also, plenty of advice, and whatever else it takes for all of us to be successful on this Grow a Row campaign, which just happened. Latifa happened just at the right time for this presentation. So I'm really excited about that. Now let's talk about what we came for on the next slide, please, which was, backyard gardens, container gardens, broken limbs, any of your questions. We'll get to those in a minute, but I do want to acknowledge that we're going to address those. We are in hardiness zone 7A here in Fredericksburg, and we're right on the fall line, right of the Piedmont. And it's where the river is no longer navigable because of the elevation. And this, of course, was a colonial era port to the old world from the new world. And the average killing frost in this area is in the range of April 20 to May 10th, depending on your elevation. I successfully planted last year on April 30th. So, and I'm right there in Brayhead Woods on the south end of Fredericksburg, not too high. So maybe the end of April, it can be a rule of thumb in terms of when to plant. And really that's when you can start not worrying about whether a frost could kill it. You see, you can plant it earlier and then on frosty nights, cover it in any number of ways. And I can help you with that. And definitely when you study the seed packet, look at how much time it takes to germinate. It's all on the packet, and it may even indicate the temperature, prevailing temperature and when to plant it. And so we can work on those things. You can also start things indoors in a sunny window, or as I do, just because I'm nuts about this. I have a couple of grow lights and I have a couple of warming pads. And so I use the grow light during the day. Don't use them together because they'll fry your little seedlings. But they certainly make a difference to get a head start. And in your questions, we'll certainly be able to talk about what level of sun and so forth. So now I'd like to take a quick run through reminder for a lot of us about composting. And for those of you who kind of get left behind by the technology here that I mentioned, don't worry. If you're going to grow a row, I'll explain it all to you. We'll make sure it happens. Now, clearly, the elements of composting, we call them browns and greens. The other two elements, of course, are air and water. We know what they are. So that's H2O and O2, right? Well, browns are carbon, primarily carbon-based, and greens are nitrogen have more nitrogen anyway. Certainly have plenty of carbon, everything does. So on the next slide, is you'll see that we're really talking about a mixture in your compost of conceivably half and half, but definitely at least 1/3 green. If you get over half green, it can tend to get a little wet and slimy and risk becoming anaerobic, which is where that methane comes from. So we really want to keep it aired up so it has plenty of oxygen, so it does not get stinky and contribute to global warming. And next page. And here's some examples quickly of what you mean by greens. Kitchen scraps, green grass, clippings, coffee grounds, tea bags if they're not plastic, houseplant leaves. I generate a lot of those. You can use manure, packaged manure, or if you know have a good source, but be careful of manure. Any farm animals you really want to be careful about. No meat, fat, gristle, bones, or dairy should go into your home compost. Professional and commercial composting, why? That's a different story. They really control the burn, so to speak, and they can denature those things. But don't try this at home. Browns, of course, leaves are the most obvious brown things. I have a stack this high for next year of collected leaves, which I've chopped up. But I am nuts about these things. Twigs, straw, you can tear up cardboard, sawdust if it's from untreated lumber, paper towels even. A lot of those paper towels are so bleached, they don't have any trouble going into the compost. Just tear them up so they have plenty of air in them. Dryer lint is primarily from cotton. Don't worry about a little bit of plastic, clothing generated in the dryer lint. That's hardly anything, and it won't affect the plants. And certainly newspapers or other types of bedding. So common problems. The balance between green and brown. Keep it damp. Your compost pile, keep it damp. It'll cook faster. Wet like a wrung out sponge, not sodden. And you can. And if it gets too wet, you can always add more, like torn up cardboard or leaves or anything to give it more room for air. Cold, there are two kinds of composting, cold and what I call hot. A cold pile, you just leave it. Andy Craig, I think he was on this. Andy Craig is good at composting, and he throws stuff in the corner, and next year, why? It's beautiful down there. So you can make a pile, just cover it, leave it, dig a hole in a trench, plant on top of it next year. I know people who have made compost bins out of bales of straw and just put everything in the middle and let the compost rot to the outside and just keep surrounding it with more bales each year. Or you can make that your garden. Just turn it under, move the straw aside and turn it under. Or you can layer stuff. Comforter referring to the covers, the wonderful warm covers that you put in layers over the stuff. And that's for the advanced class if you want, but you can look it up, comforter composting. It's really a lot of fun. And if you have time, it's a wonderful way to just let it happen, especially if you're going to do no-till gardening, which is also for another class. So there's a lot we can do with composting, turning it into the garden. Hot composting is like farming, and you have to turn it a lot to keep the mix proper. But I have a long probe thermometer, and I've gotten it up to 140 degrees. And if it's at 140 degrees for 4 days, you know it's killed all the bad stuff and denatured those seeds and everything else. So it's just fantastic when it heats like that. And here's a great picture. That's a little extreme. That's about to explode. And there's a bin for every gardener. You've seen them all. This is a matter of style. You really don't have to spend a lot of money on compost bins. There's so many abandoned pallets around. And the neatest bins, I think, are those crafted from pallets. And then Andy Craig, again, is really good at crafting from pallets. But I love this twig compost. A composter here. really creative. It's whatever you want to do, whatever looks good, whatever makes you happy. This looks like what's up in the corner of downtown Greens presently, right? And it's probably in much worse shape than this right now. Who knows? I think the downtown Greens composting is going to get a big workout in the coming year. Right, let's see, here we go. Okay, so now in conclusion, and look, I'm not yet at the half hour. It's become very apparent to me that we really have a duty, if we possibly can, to keep our kitchen waste and yard waste, whatever we're throwing out of the landfill, and keep it where it belongs, which is either in the garden, in a compost pile, in the pile in the corner, wherever it works, to put it back in the soil and keep it from polluting our atmosphere. Turn it to the soil. And I have, especially with kids, I was presenting at the Dr. Yum program where they had families with kids out in their demonstration garden, and I created this little ditty. I'm sure the kids would really glom onto this song of mine. Green and brown, wet it down, turn it till it's cold. What do you got? Black gold. You know, we can find a way to find a nursery rhyme or something that'll give us some sound to that. And so I'm ready for questions now. Rich, do we have any questions, please?
Yeah.
Please. Okay.
So I have to do mostly container gardening because I have a deck.
I will repeat the question in a minute. Yeah.
So my question is there an alternative that's more sustainable, natural composting field than just buying potting soil from Lowe's?
So the question for the container gardener in front of us here tonight is there any alternative better than the mass-produced bags from Lowe's or any other big box store? And from this presentation tonight, would you have any ideas?
Yeah, I feel like I could definitely put compost in there, but like.
How well done does it have to be?
Yeah, and how, I mean, can you grow in just pure really good compost, or should there be something else? And
If you have, and we're talking about big pots or trays, and
Like-
yeah, big trays,
Yeah.
right? Okay, well, big trays like that, it would be smartest to have a separate composter to process your compost and let it age. And you're welcome after class to come up and try this stuff because you'll see just how much fun it is to use. And if you have a separate composter, I'll be glad to help you on how that could fit into your decor, because obviously that's space constrained and such, you know. But really a little bit of this compost goes a long way. You just work it in at the top and sprinkle it in, you know, water it down a little bit. A little go a long way, and add more mid-year. You probably don't need a soil test for a container, generally speaking. Does that help?
Yeah, yeah.
Rich? I'm sorry. couldn't hear.
Local veggies and
Chicago.
mushrooms.
Local gardening groups. Frankly, I've been away for a little while and I don't have a sense of where the local gardening groups are, especially in this COVID period. I would say, you know, ask your neighbors, ask your friends. I'm sorry, I don't have. Does anybody have any suggestions? Rich? There's a group on Facebook, local gardening. Yeah. Thank you. Andy is asking about plastic fibers and dryer lids. And my take on that is, first of all, the plastic is not likely to get into the plant, whatever plant you want. And secondly, most of dryer lint is from cotton-based materials that you put in the dryer and less from synthetics. That's my perception of it. But when you look at the quantity of dryer lint compared to anything else in in my compost pile or my compost bucket that I have in the kitchen, it's minuscule. So Andy, that's a good question, and I think a lot of people are hung up about that. And I would discount it. If you're looking for a certificate in organic gardening, stay away from plastic. Thank you, Andy. Rich.
I'm very asking about, you've got some basics about container gardening.
So container gardening, it's really the same rule of thumb. You do want to have a very good material, soil. And a good way to start is from any of those bags of soil from anybody. You can spend all you want. You go to a higher priced place, you probably get better stuff, but really it's, I think the key issues in container gardening have to do with weather. You really can't start stuff early in containers because, container being above ground is going to maintain the current temperature. You can try to wrap it with quilts and things on cold nights, but it's kind of a losing battle, I think. And likewise, the opposite in July and August. You're really going to have it in the shade or semi-shade, keep the sun off it more, and also keep it water it much more frequently in terms of containers. Otherwise, sky's the limit. And there's all kinds of artistic stuff happening now. A lot of people have gotten really creative, blending flowers and vegetables in containers and pseudo containers and built up gardens and landscaping, vegescaping, whatever the new words are. There was something in the freelance the other day about that from I think an AP source. Yes, Patrick.
I have composting, but about all I put in is kitchen waste. And there's a lot of stuff that takes a long time to decompose. I don't know how to get this nice granular looking brown stuff. There's bits like that, but a lot of it is still orange peels and eggshells and
Right.
stuff like that.
Okay, thank you. The question from Patrick is, how do you get this really fine, wonderful compost when you have orange peels and eggshells and banana peels and apple cores, not what I'm elaborating, all that bulky stuff? And my answer is chop it up. What I do is right by my sink is a cutting board and a cleaver. So I take a banana peel, I just put it on the cutting board, I go chop, 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 and put it in my compost bin already macerated. The smaller the bits, the greater the surface area to volume ratio and more access by these microbes to get in there and chew it up fast. They love to have access to the stuff. And orange peels are notorious. For example, orange rinds or grapefruit rinds, even worse, so thick. So I just chop those guys up into less than an inch square, like half-inch square. I'm nuts about this. I want fast compost. I'm creating my own demand for my compost. So for me, fast compost solves that problem. Does that help?
Well, yeah, and the other part of the question is it too green?
Oh.
I've got lots of plants that are taken over from the garden, which are in a separate pile, but they're big stalks of sunflowers and polymops and stuff like that.
The question is, because it's just kitchen waste and such, is it too green? And the answer is yes, you're absolutely right. You really must follow those rules of at most 50-50 green to brown, and actually better really 1/3 green to 2/3 brown to keep it from getting slimy and anaerobic. That's a matter of taste, but that's why it's good to have maybe a pile somewhere of chopped leaves that you can use to augment all the kitchen scraps and other green things. And if you have stalks from the garden, that'll be brown, pretty much, unless it's bright green and fresh. But the old stalks of plants you could chop up, or you run your mower over or something, and that'll provide more carbon to the mix. Rich, please.
So let me bring it.
Ray.
What happens if you were to add something like
I missed that. I'm sorry. What happened if you add what? Anybody know what that is? I'm sorry.
It's like the activated charcoal, the biochar.
Biochar? I'm sorry, I don't know what biochar is. Can you talk to me after class, please? I'd like to learn. Please.
What tips do you have for someone who's a beginner? I don't know anything about gardening, so if I wanted to, get into it, how would I start that?
The question is if I'm new to gardening, how do I get involved? Where do I start? And I would say find a friend to work with and just tag along. Sorry? Visit Downtown Greens. There you go. You've got lots of friends waiting for you at Downtown Greens. Thank you. Rich.
Gary Lane is saying she has a 10 by 20 garden. She's never tested the soil. Should she do just one test?
Excuse me. Thank you. That's an excellent question. And the question is, Mary has a 10 by 20 garden, which is fairly big by backyard standards. And that's awesome. I'd love to see it. And the question is, she's never done a soil test. Should she do just one? And the answer, of course, is it depends. I'm a consultant, or I was a consultant in my professional life. It always depends. But you see, let's pretend that Mary, for discussion purposes, used half the garden for flowers and half the garden for vegetables. Let's just pretend that. So clearly, those are two different soil needs, generally speaking. And when you take a look at the soil test instructions that come with the little collapsible box to send to Virginia Tech for $10, it instructs you on to fill out exactly what kind of garden you're testing for, because different gardens require different pH values, acidity, alkalinity, different levels of various trace nutrients and such. So I would say if you rotate everything through the whole garden within the course of 3 years or so, which is what I do, you really only need to test once. That, in other words, it would be the soil would be pretty homogeneous in terms of its nutritional value. Hope that helps. Please, and here in front, just a second, Bridget.
I'm assuming you're a master gardener. I feel like I read that somewhere. Is there like a local program for that? And like, what is it? And how would I sign up?
Right. The question is, so what is a master gardener anyway? I'm a master gardener. I took the course 2017. And it's a semester-long course offered through our local extension office, which is in the Browser Building on Route 1 in Stafford. And also online, you can find it very easily. Just go to Virginia Extension Stafford, and I'm sure you'll come there. And the guy Muzzy, who is the extension agent for our area, is crackerjack. He is so skilled and so wonderful. And it's so funny. It goes like a breeze. It's a semester-long course. Meets twice a week. There is a big exam at the end. It's open book. So it's really about showing up and participating and really getting to know. This is the course book. Of course, have I been to every page? No.
Do you know when you took it in the
Oh,
year?
it's in the fall. Yeah. But there are other courses. In the spring, I believe there's a Master Naturalist course, which is also fun. Check it out, because there are a bunch of other courses too through all the county extension or the Virginia Tech Extension Service throughout the Commonwealth. Rich, please.
Lisa is asking whether the art board is still doing bids for residents.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear it.
Whether the art board is still doing bids for residents.
Bins of compost bins? The answer to my knowledge is no. The R board And the R board, for everybody's sake, is the board between the city and at least one county. I think it's Fredericksburg and Stafford, which which is trying to accomplish a lot of things in the way of recycling. And I think COVID has put a halt to all that stuff. There certainly are not bins out anywhere, to my knowledge, for public use. Rich?
Nancy says her garden is full of earthworms, which is good, but almost too many, she said. She's wondering if it would be a good idea to add something like more sand or something to the soil to thin out the number of earthworms.
The question is, her garden, Nancy's garden has too many earthworms. And let me just say this about that. Why? I would say that the presence of earthworms means you have healthy soil. And you could certainly extend your garden and give those earthworms more space, more elbow room, if you will. Do they have elbows? And aside from that, just be happy you have earthworms. I have earthworms, but I also have their predators. And let me dilate on that for just a second, because that might be a problem that they're not really familiar with. The predator that I have is moles, moles with an M. And moles are carnivores. They eat the earthworms and the grubs. So when you have moles, you've got a problem because they're eating these good guys. The grubs are not good guys, but the earthworms. And right behind them in the same channels come the voles with a V, right? And the voles are vegetarian. And they come in using those channels, and they come right in to my little sprouts of spinach or whatever I just planted, and they pull them right down. They eat all the little shoots, right? At the bottom of the plant. I see a lot of nods in the audience here. My solution to this, hardware cloth. I line, especially in my compost bins, I line my compost bins sides and bottom with hardware cloth, which is welded wire that's been galvanized, so it lasts a long time. And with the fine mesh hardware cloth, the earthworms can get through, but these predators cannot. So not too fine a mesh, so the earthworms can get through. Hope that helps, please.
I have a question on the predator track that we're on. It's been going for a while and the whole. I think it was doing great. Also, off the raccoons and possums and creature come out and
Stop doing it. So the question is, can a compost bin be too attractive to predators? Raccoons and possums and in an urban setting, mice and rats, coyotes. The coyotes are coming after the other critters that are coming after. Deer, right. So and Adam, you haven't had any predators? No, yeah. North Carolina, right. Well, North Carolina, the predators are pretty wild. I don't know about Virginia. No, there's no solution to predators other than, common sense measures that I would think of. We have a dog. I have a dog, and I also have a fence. So that tends to keep the deer and the raccoons and the woodchucks. Not North Carolina, no. Right. So I would take defensive measures and use hardware cloth and other, or chicken wire. Sure. If they're coming in over the top, then put hardware cloth over the top, make that kind of your lid. And I would say trial and error and see what works and see what else you can do. Rich, question.
Andy is asking what to do with limited line field. They provide the compost.
Andy asked about lemon and lime peelings or skins. They're hard to compost. Well, again, I macerate those babies. And if you reduce them to 1/4-inch chunks, why, they'll disappear in 2 weeks because of the surface to volume ratio. Again, those bugs that are natural in the soil. These are the bugs that are there anyway. You don't have to add any special stuff to cause a compost bin to compost or a garden to get fertile, because those creatures are there. And if you just give them access to surfaces that they can eat when they have air and water to help them, why, they'll multiply and just chomp that stuff away. But it's really got to be chopped up. Otherwise, put it in the back corner and let it go for 3 or 4 years, and it'll decompose eventually. Patrick.
So I haven't had much luck doing soil testing. I had trouble finding out where I could get the boxes, and then they never seem to come back. I never seem to get a result. So I bought them online. You know, it's a home testing.
Capsules, right. Right.
Have you any experience with them? Do they work?
The soil tests that you buy in stores or online, I've been very disappointed with personally. I don't mean to slam them. I'm sure they vary tremendously in their efficacy, but the lab at Virginia Tech for $10 whole, and I have the right kit for you right here, and the instructions, and my own brain. So within us, we'll get it done. You see, it won't fail, and they email you. You put your email on it, and they email you the result. They don't rely on US mail for the result. Okay, so definitely I suggest a soil test. If you're going after different crops, do multiple soil tests. Do them 2 or 3 years in succession, just to check. And especially if you're new to an area, there are a lot of weird deposits of various minerals in various soils around here. I heard of a new development, a housing development, that suddenly all the lawns, they had rolled out, you know, these manufactured lawns, grass that comes in rolls, and within a few weeks they all turned yellow. And it turned out there was a band of sulfur in that soil right below there. And if some of you may remember seeing sort of an orange yellow down there in Spotsylvania along Route 95, the other side of Route 95, or the developments out there, where they had scraped all the soil off, and some bands of really horrible yellow stuff. And there's also a lot of iron as well, which would be red. Any other questions? Let's see, Richard?
How soon can I begin planting seeds in the ground? Like, you know, all I should wait to start. So what can I put in the ground? How soon can I do it?
The question is, how soon can I put things in the ground? I've got some seeds and want to plant them. Oftentimes, right on the packet, it will give you a sense of the time to plant, or the hardiness zone to plant it in, or you can look up the hardiness zone. We are in zone 7A, which is a national standard that everybody uses, and you can look up the planting times, which really is about the average final frost in the springtime, and then the average beginning frost in the fall. And that's your planting season really for regular vegetables and things. So it really depends on where you are and what you want to plant. Rich?
Safe for me to plant radishes in March?
Is it safe to plant radishes in March? I would say yes. I would say let's go toward later in March, but it really depends again on your elevation. We have a lot of different elevations within the sound of my voice, so to speak. So I'd also say try it. And on cold nights, put a blanket on it of some kind. Put a little flush over it or something. More questions? Val, did you have a question? No? No? Anybody, any more questions there, Rich? Please.
What is the next gardening class going to be?
We're doing these gardening classes every second Tuesday for the foreseeable future. And, as long as we have a turnout, and thank you all very much for joining us. Thank you. That's it.
So do you actually have